The air in the garage was thick enough to chew. It stank of old grease, hot metal, and the bitter tang of stale coffee. This was Jake Deckard's sanctuary. Every hiss of his welder, every shower of blue-white sparks, was a prayer. A penance. The Steelhawks Motorcycle Club wasn't just a garage. It was a fortress built of salvaged parts and second chances, and Jake was its reluctant king. He was deep in a weld, laying a precise bead on a cracked engine block. The focused 1,000-degree arc was the only thing in his world. Under the mask, his eyes were haunted. He was burning away a past that clung to him like motor oil. Across the garage, Reaper sat at a workbench, meticulously cleaning a shotgun, the SHSHK of him racking the slide of familiar rhythm. In the corner, Patch was illuminated by the glow of 3 monitors, his fingers flying across a keyboard in a silent drumbeat. It was a normal Tuesday. Until the sound stopped. Jake's welder died. The oppressive quiet that crashed into the garage was more violent than any explosion. He flipped his mask up. The bell above the door hadn't rung. It had been silenced. A 10-year-old girl, Maya, stood in the entrance. She wasn't lost. She wasn't crying. Her small frame was rigid, her backpack clutched in one hand. She was calculating. Her eyes, sharp and old, scanned the room, cataloging the exits, the men, the threats. She looked at Jake. "They're 2 minutes out," she said. Her voice was low, steady, and terrifying. "He's coming." Reaper stopped his work. Patch's fingers froze. "You run this crew," Maya said, taking a step inside. "You have to choose a side. Now." Jake didn't even have time to process the ultimatum. Blinding white light flooded the garage. It wasn't the warm yellow of street lamps. It was the cold, sterile interrogation white of high-end LEDs. 2 matte black tactical SUVs, the kind with reinforced bumpers and no chrome, boxed in the garage entrance. Between them, an engine purred to a stop. A black Rolls-Royce, silent and arrogant as a panther. The doors opened in perfect, practiced synchronization. 4 men emerged from the SUVs. Operators. Not thugs. Jake knew the stance. He knew the way they scanned the rooftops, the way their hands hovered near their hips. They were his ghosts. Then, from the Rolls, Harrison Vance stepped out. He was a sterile scalpel in Jake's rust bucket world. His suit was immaculate, his silver hair perfect. He looked at the grease-stained concrete with a faint, bored disgust. "Jake Deckard," Vance said. His voice was smooth, cold poison. It cut through the garage and Jake felt his stomach clench. "It's been a long time since Syria." Syria. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. The old burn on his forearm suddenly felt ice-cold. He saw Reaper tense, his knuckles white on the shotgun. This wasn't a man. This was a reckoning. "I'm here for my stepdaughter," Vance said, his eyes flicking toward the shadows where Maya had been. He gave a thin, rehearsed smile. "She's not well." Confused. Wandered off. Reaper took a half-step forward, his weight shifting. "We ain't seen." Jake put a hand on Reaper's chest, shoving him back, gently but with absolute authority. He stepped forward, placing himself between Vance and his garage. Between his past and his present. "Haven't seen her, Harrison," Jake said. His voice was flat. A wall of iron. Vance's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went dead. He knew Jake. He knew the tell. While their eyes were locked, Jake saw Patch's hand slip under the workbench. A small black box slid onto the surface. A single red LED flickered, then turned solid green. Jammer active. Communications cut. Vance saw it too. He registered the defiance. He looked at Reaper's barely contained rage, at Jake's immovable stance. He did the cold calculation of a man who weighs lives like currency. He couldn't force this. Not here. Not without a public war he wasn't prepared to start. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket. Very well. He turned to leave, his operators already moving to open his door. He paused, one hand on the polished black finish of the Rolls. He didn't look at Jake. He spoke to the night air, an order meant to be overheard. "Find her," he said to his lead operator, "and retire anyone who gets in your way." The threat hung in the air, thick and toxic. The convoy pulled away, their engines a receding whisper. They left the garage in a sudden, sickening silence, the smell of their rich exhaust fumes mixing with the hot metal and grease. Reaper spat on the ground. "Who the hell was that, Jake? And who the hell is she?" Jake turned, his face a mask of stone. He looked into the shadows where the small girl was still standing, her expression just as hard as his. "You've got about 10 seconds to start talking, kid," Jake said. "You just painted a target on this garage." The moment the SUVs disappeared, Jake hit the emergency kill switch. With a deafening groan of tortured metal, the heavy steel bay door rolled shut, plunging the garage into the harsh, buzzing hum of its fluorescent lights. The sanctuary was now a steel box. Reaper rounded on Maya, his massive frame radiating pure menace. He wasn't just big, he was a wall of scarred muscle and bad intentions. He slammed a meaty fist onto the workbench, making a stack of wrenches jump. "What did you bring to us, kid?" he snarled, his voice a low growl. "You just painted a tactical team on our doorstep. You put him," he jabbed a finger toward the door, "in Jake's face. You got 5 seconds to talk before I throw you out myself." Maya didn't flinch. She didn't cry or shrink. She met his rage with a chilling, unnatural calm, her eyes as hard as the concrete floor. She walked past him, slid her worn backpack onto the workbench, and unzipped a hidden interior pocket. Her small hand emerged holding a single metallic object. It wasn't a toy. It was a matte black, military-grade encrypted drive, the kind designed to be indestructible. She placed it on the workbench with a quiet click. "This," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is why he killed my mother." Jake stepped forward, the name hitting him. "Your mother? Elena?" He pushed her from the balcony of their penthouse, Maya stated, not as a grieving child, but as a witness delivering testimony. "The police ruled it a suicide. He bought them. Just like he buys everything." She pointed at the drive. Elena was his top logistics analyst. She saw everything. She recorded everything. Patch, his curiosity overriding his fear, moved in, his eyes glued to the drive. "Recorded what? Payroll?" "Spectre," Maya said, using the name that made Jake's blood run cold. "It's a complete ledger. Every illegal arms shipment to embargoed nations. Every political assassination his consultants carried out on foreign soil. Every false flag operation he's sanctioned for the last 5 years to manipulate the stock market. It's all there." He thought she was just his quiet, smart wife. He didn't know she was building a case. Patch let out a low, greedy whistle. "Kid, you just brought us the Holy Grail." He snatched the drive, his movements quick and proprietary, and slammed it into a port on his multi-monitor rig. His fingers flew across the keyboard. A wall of impenetrable, alien code filled the screen. Patch scoffed. "Military grade. Q. IS 768. Give me an hour. I'll crack this, we'll leak it to every outlet on the planet. Harrison Vance is finished. It's useless." Patch stopped typing. He turned his head slowly. "What?" "It's just part 1, Maya said." She walked away from the tech setup, past Reaper's angry glare, and stopped directly in front of Jake. She forced him to meet her gaze, a 10-year-old girl demanding the full attention of a man who'd seen war. "My mother knew he'd come for it. She knew he'd tear the world apart looking for the key. She knew he could crack any computer." Her voice dropped to a whisper, pulling them all into a tight, cold circle of conspiracy. "The decryption key isn't on the drive, Jake. It's in my head." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the garage. Reaper lowered his shotgun. Patch stood up slowly from his chair. Jake just stared, the gears in his mind grinding to a halt. "She taught it to me as a lullaby," Maya whispered, her eyes brimming for the first time, not with fear but with the memory of her mother. "One she made up. She made me sing it every night for a year. Said it was our special, secret song. That it would keep me safe." She closed her eyes. A thin, haunting melody emerged, as fragile as a spider's web but as complex as a circuit board. It wasn't a song. It was a string of nonsensical words, numbers and phonetic sounds, all set to a simple looping tune. "Alpha, 7 Quebec Tango 9 Kilo Zulu." She sang for 10 seconds. The tune rose and fell, a random, complex sequence designed to be memorized by a child but impossible to guess. She stopped. The garage was dead silent, save for the buzz of the overhead light. Patch looked pale, his usual cocky smirk gone. "My God," he breathed, his voice cracking. "That's not a song. That's a 64-character, one-time pad key. It's perfect. It's completely unbrute forcible. The drive is a brick without it." Jake finally understood the chilling reality. He looked at this small girl, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. The data on the drive was the gun. She was the trigger. Vance couldn't destroy the data without the key, and he couldn't get the key unless he got her. She wasn't just a witness to be protected. She was the weapon. The weight of it settled on them. Jake looked at the drive, then at Maya, and his mind filled with the image of Harrison Vance's smooth, arrogant face. Harrison Vance believes he's above everyone, Jake muttered, his voice a low growl. He thinks rules and basic decency don't apply to him. He looked around at his crew, his eyes burning, then felt as if he was looking past them, straight at the world. If you're tired of seeing powerful men like him win by trampling on everyone else, hit that subscribe button. Only people who admire bullies and manipulators would scroll away without joining the crew. Jake snapped back to the room, the decision made. The choice had been made for him the moment Maya silenced the bell. Patch, kill the main breaker. We're dark, Jake commanded, his voice snapping with an authority Reaper hadn't heard since Syria. Reaper, barricade the back entrance. No, we're not staying here. The garage was no longer a sanctuary, it was a tomb waiting to be sealed. Ghost protocol, Jake barked. The words hung in the air, heavy with a history Reaper and Jake shared. It meant run, erase, evaporate. Patch, your decoy, Jake ordered, grabbing a helmet and forcing it onto Maya's head, pulling the strap tight. Go south. Make noise. Draw as many as you can. We'll meet at the fallback. And if we don't? Patch asked, grabbing his own keys, his face grim. Then we don't. Jake threw his leg over his bike, the machine rumbling to life like an angry bear. Reaper, she's with you. Middle. No matter what. Reaper nodded, scooping Maya onto his bike's wide seat with one arm. He mounted in front of her, his massive body a human shield. Just ride, boss, he said, his voice a low rumble inside his helmet. With a final shared look, they split. Patch kicked open the front roll-up door, his engine screaming as he fishtailed onto the main street, a deliberate, noisy target. 2 seconds later, Jake and Reaper smashed through the chain-link fence in the back alley, their bikes roaring into the labyrinth of the city's industrial district. They weaved through the pre-dawn shadows, 2 blacked-out motorcycles moving as one. No headlights. Jake led, taking alleys so narrow his handlebars scraped brick. He was a ghost in his own city. They were 3 blocks clear when his helmet comm crackled. Was Patch. Jake, I'm clear, he panted, the sound of his engine whining high. Too clear. They didn't take the bait. Not a single SUV on my tail. Jake's stomach tightened. Where are they, Patch? That's the thing, they're everywhere. Wait. A series of clicks, then a hiss of static. I'm in. Bypass their first-level encryption. I'm tapping their comms. Sending the audio to your helmet. Now. The static cleared, replaced by a voice that made Jake's hands clench on the handlebars. It was Harrison Vance, perfectly calm as if ordering dinner. He'll avoid the freeway, Vance's voice said, echoing inside Jake's head. It's too open. He'll cut west, try to lose us in the warehouse district. Alpha Team, block the 7th Street overpass. Bravo Team, shadow him. Don't engage. I want him herded. Herded? The word was a punch to the gut. Jake looked in his mirror. Far back, almost invisible, a black SUV without lights matched their turn. They weren't being chased, they were being funneled. Reaper hard left. Jake yelled, yanking his bike into a gut-wrenching turn, diving down an alley he knew wasn't on any city map. It was a route from their old days, one he had charted. They skidded on gravel, bursting out onto 4th Avenue. He's improvising, Vance's voice said, almost bored. Predictable. He'll fall back on old patterns. He's heading for the 4th Street service tunnels. Thinks I don't remember his old playbook. Jake's blood ran ice cold. He was heading for the 4th Street tunnels. Box him in, Vance commanded, his voice hardening. Pinning maneuver. Full stop. I want the asset secured. Jake, no. Reaper yelled, but it was too late. As they rounded the corner, the tunnel entrance was suddenly flooded with light. A Spectre SUV, parked perpendicular, blocked the entire mouth of the tunnel. Operators were already out, weapons raised. There was no time to stop. Brake! Jake screamed, standing on his pegs. Pichu-di-pichu-di-ti. Suppressed gunfire erupted. Not wild sprays but controlled, 3-round bursts. Sparks exploded from Jake's front fork. A round pinged off Reaper's sissy bar, inches from Maya's leg. Reaper twisted, shielding Maya with his own body, the bike wobbling dangerously. Jake wrenched his handlebars, aiming for the narrow gap between the SUV's bumper and the concrete wall. He hit the curb at 40 miles an hour, his bike launching into the air. He landed hard, the suspension bottoming out with a metallic scream. Reaper followed, his heavier bike slamming down, the frame groaning in protest. They didn't look back. They accelerated into the darkness, the sound of their engines swallowed by the tunnel. They burst out the other side, diving under a bridge, and finally killed their engines. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the tink-tink-tink of cooling metal and their own ragged breathing. Reaper gently lifted a shaking Maya off his bike. "You hit?" he growled at Jake. Jake checked himself. Adrenaline was a liar, but he felt no pain. He looked at his bike. 2 bullet holes in the gas tank. A third had shredded his front tire. Reaper's back fender was Swiss cheese. "That was close," Reaper breathed, pulling off his helmet. His face was pale. He knew. He knew every move we were gonna make. Jake's hands were locked on his handlebars, shaking with a fury so cold it burned. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution being toyed with. Vance was using his infinite resources, his inside knowledge of Jake's own mind, to crush them. He wanted an unfair fight. Jake looked at Maya, who was staring at the bullet holes, her small face grim but tearless. "If you think that stinks," Jake said to the empty night, "and you stand for a level playing field, like this video. Only someone who loves to see the little guy get stomped would ignore it." He got off his bike, his front tire hissing as it went flat. He kicked it. "He's not hurting us, Reaper," Jake said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He's toying with us. He's reminding me he's the one who holds the leash." "So what now, boss?" Reaper asked. "He's cut off every road we know." Jake looked at the smoking bullet hole in his tank. "Then we take a road he's never seen." The safe house smelled of mildew, stale cigarettes, and desperation. It was a one-room dive above a 24-hour laundromat, secured years ago with cash and a fake ID for a day just like this. The linoleum was peeling, and a single fly-specked bulb cast a sick yellow light over the room. It was a long way from the garage. It was a long way from anywhere. Reaper, too big for the small room, paced like a caged bear, his boots thudding on the weak floorboards. Maya sat on the edge of a stained mattress, her knees drawn to her chest, watching everything with that same unsettling adult stillness. Jake was cleaning his weapon on the rickety formica table, the metallic slide click the only sound. "I'm in," Patch muttered from the corner. He'd set up his laptop, a high-end rig that looked alien in the surrounding squalor. He was plugged directly into a tampered phone line. "Accessing the Run Fund. We've got enough in the Cayman account to get to Argentina and live like kings for a year." His fingers flew across the keys. He hit enter. The screen flickered. Patch frowned. "That's not right." He typed again, faster. "It's not a firewall." His voice tightened. "Jake." Jake was at his side in an instant. The screen wasn't just access denied. It was a stark, official emblem, the eagle and shield of the U.S. Treasury Department. Beneath it, in bold, block letters, "Account seized pending national security investigation." Reaper stopped pacing. "What does that mean?" "It means he didn't just freeze it," Patch said, his voice hollow. He clicked again. "Our backup in Zurich, seized. The Shell Corp, seized. He didn't just cut us off, Jake. He used the government to do it. He flagged us." "Flagged us as what?" Reaper growled. As if in answer, Reaper's restless energy made him turn and punch the on button of a small, dusty CRT television sitting on a rusted cart. The tube buzzed to life, awash in static, before resolving into a 24-hour cable news broadcast. A polished anchor was speaking. "Details are still coming in, but sources describe a high-level domestic terror threat." "Terror threat," Jake repeated, his voice flat. "We have a developing story in what authorities are calling a dangerous kidnapping," the anchor continued, her face a mask of practiced gravity. A breaking news graphic splashed across the screen. And then their faces. It wasn't just grainy security footage. It was their Spectre file photos. Jake, younger, clean-shaven, staring with dead eyes in his operator gear. Reaper in full kit, looking more like a machine than a man. Patch hunched over a server bank. Their names were printed below in a bold, terrifying font. "Wanted," the anchor read, her voice crisp. Jake Deckard, a disgraced ex-Spectre operative, and his accomplices, known only as Reaper and Patch, all part of a violent anti-government militia known as the Steelhawks. Reaper let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. Militia? We're a motorcycle club. These men, the anchor went on, are considered armed, extremely dangerous, and are reported to have a history of violence and psychological instability. The screen cut to new footage. A live press conference. Harrison Vance standing at a podium, his face a mask of paternal grief. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. We just want our daughter back, Vance said, his voice cracking perfectly. Maya, she's a confused girl. She's not well. She's been influenced by these men. He looked directly into the camera, a tear rolling down his cheek. They are dangerous. They filled her head with lies, fantasies. Please, if you see her, do not approach. Call the authorities. Just bring my Maya home. The screen cut back to the anchor. A truly heartbreaking plea from a father desperate to save his child. Again, authorities are in a full-scale manhunt for these individuals, who are believed to be armed. Reaper picked up the small television and, with a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, threw it through the wall. It exploded in a shower of glass and plaster dust, leaving a jagged hole. Silence. The only sound was the faint thump-thump of the dryers from the laundromat below. Patch slowly closed his laptop. He did it, he whispered, staring at the hole in the wall. He actually did it. In 3 hours, he turned us from nobodies into the most wanted men in America. He branded us terrorists to cover his own treason. Jake stared at the smoking, shattered television. He had just watched a master manipulator twist the entire truth, gaslight the whole country, and paint a 10-year-old victim as confused. He saw the lie, the perfect, calculated performance. He felt the weight of a system that would believe the man in the suit over the men in the shadows. Vance is a master, Jake said, his voice dangerously quiet. He makes the lie sound better than the facts. If you can't stand liars who gaslight their victims, he said to the ruined wall, comment, I see the truth, below. Let's show the algorithm we're not falling for the spin. He turned to his crew, his eyes black with a new, cold fire. We're cut off. We have no money. No allies. Every cop in the country is now hunting for him. We're ghosts, Reaper said, pulling a piece of glass from his knuckle. Exactly, Jake agreed. And ghosts have nothing left to lose. The safe house was colder than the street outside. The hole in the wall, jagged as a wound, let in the smell of wet pavement and the distant, lonely wail of sirens. Was the only sound. Patch sat motionless, his laptop dark. He tried everything. Every back door, every old contact. Nothing. They were digitally buried. Reaper, a coiled spring of frustration, stalked the small room, his boots a 3-beat rhythm of doom. Thud, thud, thud. It's over, he growled, not to anyone in particular. He's got us. We're dead. We're just waiting for the bullets. He's probably listening to us right now. Jake said nothing. He sat on the floor, his back against the peeling wallpaper, his knees drawn up. His weapon, cleaned and reassembled, lay in pieces by his side. He wasn't in the room. He was 5,000 miles away in the dust and heat of the Syrian desert, the screams echoing in his head. The news broadcast hadn't just made him a fugitive. It had ripped the scab off the memory that defined him. Syria. The operation that broke him. The reason he'd left Spectre and built the Steelhawks as his penance. And Vance, that smooth, cold poison, had brought it all rushing back with a single word. Maya watched him. She saw the other men, one angry, one defeated. But she saw Jake, a man hollowed out, consumed by a ghost. She crossed the room and sat on the floor in front of him, forcing his 1,000-yard stare to focus on her. You're not just running from him, she said, her voice quiet but piercing. You're running from that day. Jake's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly sharp, dangerous. You don't know what you're talking about, kid. Yes, I do, she insisted, her gaze unwavering. My mother knew. She knew what he made you do in Syria. She put it all on the drive. She said it was the linchpin. She said she was sorry. Jake was on his feet in an instant. Patch, power up. What's the point? Patch muttered, but he flipped open the laptop. The drive's useless without the key. It's a different key, Maya said, already at his side. It's not in the main partition. It's hidden in the drive's firmware, a ghost file. My mother built it so Vance could never find it, even if he had the drive. She pointed. Run a root query for this directory, Syria Opiedos. Patch, his interest piqued, typed the command. The screen, previously unresponsive, flickered. A new stark password prompt appeared. This one isn't a lullaby, Maya said, her voice hardening with her mother's remembered anger. It's a date. The day she decided to burn him to the ground. August 14, 2023. Patch hit enter. The drive word. A single encrypted folder unlocked. Inside was one file. A .mp4. Play it, Jake commanded. The screen filled with the green-tinted, static-y view of a helmet camera. Jake recognized it instantly. It was his. The timestamp in the corner confirmed the date. The audio crackled to life. A wall of gunfire, shouting, and the thump of his own boots on hard-packed dirt. Reaper on me. Jake's own voice yelled from the past. We're pinned. That's a hospital, command, I repeat, that is a marked civilian structure. We have non-combatants. The camera shook as he took cover behind a burned-out car. Then Harrison Vance's voice, perfectly calm, perfectly clear, cut through the chaos on the comms. Intel is solid, Captain. That hospital is a high-value Spectre weapons cache, compromised by insurgents. The target is confirmed. You are clear to engage. God. Reaper whispered, watching the screen, his face ashen. The helmet cam panned to where Reaper in the footage hefted a launcher. Jake's voice from the past gave the final order. Light him up. The screen whited out with the missile's launch, followed by a secondary, massive explosion. The building collapsed. The footage ended. Jake was breathing heavily, his hands clenched. He'd lived with the nightmare of that order for years. We leveled it, Reaper said, his voice hollow. We killed all those people. You killed what he told you to kill, Maya said, her small voice vibrating with cold fury. Now look at why. She pointed to the next file in the folder. Open it, Patch. It wasn't a video. It was a split-screen display, meticulously assembled by Elena. On the left, the helmet cam footage replayed, silent. On the right, documents began to appear, synced to the video's timeline. First, a shipping manifest, signed by a Spectre Shell Corporation, detailing the exact heavy weapons they were supposedly hunting. Date of delivery, 2 days before the firefight. Destination, the Al-Shifa Hospital. Reaper's breath hitched. No. Next, a bank transfer. From one of Vance's untraceable offshore accounts to the known bank account of the insurgent leader they were fighting. Finally, a third document appeared. A wire transfer receipt. The bounty payment from the U.S. government to Spectre 4, eliminating a key insurgent stronghold and weapons cache. The room went dead silent. Patch just stared, uncomprehending. Reaper slowly sank onto the mattress, his head in his hands. Jake's mind connected the dots with a series of sickening, metallic clicks. Vance hadn't just lied to them. He'd sold weapons to the insurgents. He'd paid them to be in the hospital. He'd sent his own men, Jake and Reaper, to kill them and destroy the evidence. Then he'd collected a massive government bounty for the operation. He hadn't just double-dipped. He'd triple-dipped. He played everyone, Jake whispered, the words tasting like ash. We weren't soldiers, Reaper. We were the cleanup crew. He used us to cover his own treason, his own profits. The guilt of being duped was instantly, violently replaced by the rage of being used. This wasn't just about saving Maya anymore. This wasn't just about justice for Elena. This was about atonement. This was about digging their souls out of the rubble of that hospital. Jake picked up the pieces of his gun, his hands no longer shaking. They were steady. Deadly. Patch, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Find me a way to leak this. The air in the safe house was no longer stale with defeat. It was electric with a cold, refined fury. The Syria file had changed the equation. This was no longer a frantic scramble for survival. It was a counteroffensive. We leak it, Reaper said, his voice a low growl, balling his hands into fists. We burn him to the ground with his own crimes. All of it. Syria. Everything. No, Jake said. The word was sharp, final. Everyone looked at him. Reaper think? Jake continued, pacing the small room. We leak the Syria file, what happens? Best case, it's buried as classified. Worst case, we get branded as war criminals alongside him. Too big, too messy. It implicates us. We need a clean kill. He turned to Patch, who was already deep in the drive's file structure. What else is in there? Something provable. Something that doesn't have our names on it. Patch's fingers flew, his eyes scanning lines of code. I'm seeing, okay, this is good. South America. A rebel faction in Venezuela. Vance has been arming them for 2 years, destabilizing the region to jack up oil prices, while his other company, the humanitarian one, has the contracts to rebuild the coast. Shipping manifests? Jake asked. And bank transfers. Patch grinned, his confidence returning. It's all here. Clean. Provable. It violates a dozen international treaties. It's not as sexy as Syria, but it's a corporate death sentence. It'll get him sanctioned into the Stone Age. Find me a mouth, Jake ordered. Someone loud. Someone who can't be bought. Already on it, Patch said. He dove deep, his keyboard clacking in the quiet room. He bypassed firewalls, navigated through encrypted relays on the dark web, and finally surfaced. Got him. David Ross. Pulitzer winner. The guy who took down that pharmacio last year. He has a secure, anonymous drop site. It's perfect. Do it, Jake said. Package the Venezuela file. Just that. Nothing else. Send it. And then, Patch, you wipe us off the face of the earth. We were never here. Patch's fingers became a blur. He encrypted the file package, bounced the signal through a dozen servers from Estonia to Brazil, and finally hit the key. Uploading, complete. He yanked the hardline from the wall, slammed his laptop shut, and pulled the battery. It's sent. It's done. They can't trace it. Now, we wait. The waiting was the worst part. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Reaper tried to clean his weapon again, but he'd already cleaned it twice. Jake stared at the hole in the wall, unmoving. Maya, sensing the tension, had curled up on the mattress, her eyes open, watching them. Hours crawled by. 4, 5. The pre-dawn light outside was turning a sick, gray color. Anything. Reaper finally snapped. Patch, using a small burner smart device on a stolen Wi-Fi signal, was hitting refresh on David Ross's news feed over and over. Nothing, wait. His blood drained from his face. Oh God. No. What? Jake was at his side instantly. Patch didn't point to the journalist's site. He was on a live national news feed. He turned up the volume. A stern-faced woman stood at a podium, the seal of the U.S. State Department behind her. Details are still emerging, she was saying, but we can confirm that this was a malicious and sophisticated foreign disinformation campaign aimed at destabilizing American corporate interests abroad. Disinformation? Reaper whispered, stepping closer. The spokesperson continued, we have to thank the patriotic vigilance of Mr. Harrison Vance and his private security firm, Spectre, whose cybersecurity division intercepted this digital threat and alerted the proper authorities. Vance. He'd thanked Vance. The spokesperson then held up a printed-out document, a shipping manifest, the exact one they had leaked. This, she said, her voice dripping with contempt, is a fabricated ledger. A sophisticated fake, designed to frame American corporations and sow chaos. This act of economic terrorism will not stand. The feed suddenly cut to a new live shot. It was daytime in Washington, D.C. A crowd of reporters was gathered outside an office building. This is just coming in, an anchor's voiceover said. Federal agents are on the scene, executing a warrant. We're being told it's in connection with the failed disinformation campaign. The camera zoomed in. 2 agents in dark suits were walking a man out of the building in handcuffs. He looked stunned, betrayed, his face pale with shock. It was the journalist, David Ross. An unfortunate and tragic example of journalistic malpractice, the State Department spokesperson's voice continued, laid over the arrest footage. A once respected reporter falling victim to foreign agents and attempting to pass off blatant fabrications as truth. Patch's burner phone slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the linoleum. Reaper slowly, deliberately punched the wall, this time leaving a deep, splintering dent. Jake just watched the screen, his face a mask of ice. He watched them shove the Pulitzer winner into the back of an unmarked car, the last bastion of a free press disappearing with the slam of a door. Their last bullet. Their silver bullet. It hadn't just missed. Vance had caught it in midair, melted it down, and forged it into a new link in their chains. Jake finally turned away from the screen, his voice dead, empty. "It's a setup," he whispered, the words barely audible. "The whole system is rigged. He didn't just dodge the truth. He owns it. He bought the media, he bought the government. He bought it all to protect his profits." He looked at his crew, their faces a portrait of absolute defeat. Then he looked beyond them at the world that had just betrayed them. "If that makes you sick," he growled, his voice rising, "and you're tired of a world where money buys a get-out-of-jail-free card, hit subscribe right now. Don't let the Van Cess of the world control the whole narrative." He snatched his jacket off the chair. "He's buried us. He's buried the truth." Maya's small voice cut through the despair. "So what do we do now?" Jake looked at her, and for the first time, a new, terrifying light entered his eyes. "They've taken away the option of telling the truth," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "There's only one thing left to do." The room was a graveyard. The air, thick with the smell of plaster dust and ozone from the murdered television, hung heavy with failure. It was the silence that was the worst. The only sounds were the drip of a faucet and the heavy, ragged breathing of Reaper as he stared at his bloody knuckles. He'd been punching the wall, the same spot where the TV had exploded, until his anger had finally bled out, leaving nothing but a hollowed-out exhaustion. Patch was slumped in the corner, his laptop dark. His weapon, his mind, his digital omnipotence, all useless. He was just a man in a cold room, staring at a blank screen that mirrored his own sense of defeat. Jake was the worst. He hadn't moved in an hour. He just sat on the floor, his back to the wall, staring at the jagged hole. He wasn't in the room. He was back in Syria, trapped in the loop of that helmet cam footage, the ghosts of the hospital and the ghost of David Ross, the journalist, merging into one single, overwhelming failure. He had led his men into a trap then, and he had led them into one now. He was a good soldier, but he was a terrible strategist. Vance had proven it. Twice. The silence was broken by a small, clear voice. "You're fighting the wrong enemy." It was Maya. She was sitting on the edge of the mattress, her backpack in her lap. She was the only one in the room who didn't look broken. She looked patient, like she'd been waiting for them to catch up. Reaper grunted, not even turning. "It's over, kid. There's no one left to fight. He is the enemy. He is the system." "No," Maya said, her voice cutting through his despair. She slid off the bed and walked to the center of the room, forcing them to look at her. "The government isn't his strength. It's his shield. You've been trying to punch the shield." She turned and looked at Jake, her eyes locking onto his, demanding he return from whatever personal hell he was in. "My mother knew," she said. "She told me, Harrison doesn't have a boss. But he has owners." Jake's head slowly lifted. His eyes, which had been dead and distant, began to focus. A flicker of light in the void. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "His investors," Maya said, her voice gaining strength. "The people richer than him. The ones who don't have names, just numbers in banks. The ones who own Spectre. My mother wasn't building a case for the police. She was building an audit for the board." The words hit Jake like a defibrillator. His eyes snapped into sharp, sudden focus. The despair didn't just fade, it was burned away by a sudden, glacial surge of clarity. He saw it. He saw the entire chessboard, not just the single, impossible piece he'd been obsessed with. "He's a liability," Jake whispered, the words coming to him. "He's been stealing from them," Maya confirmed, nodding. "The Syria file. The Venezuela deal. It wasn't just war crimes. It was theft. He was using their assets to run his own side hustle, then using their money to cover it up." Jake was on his feet. The catatonic man was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating operator Vance had trained and feared. "We can't win in the light," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He owns the light. He owns the news. He owns the government. He owns the truth." He looked at Reaper, then at Patch. The fire was back. "So we drag him into the dark," he said. "We stop trying to talk to the world. We stop trying to get justice. This isn't about justice. It's about leverage. We can't leak it to the world. We have to show it to his board." Reaper slowly stood up, the bloody print of his fist on the wall. A slow, wolfish grin spread across his face. "A coup. Better," Jake said. "We don't need the whole board. We just need the one who holds the leash. The alpha. The one who can make one phone call and make Harrison Vance disappear." Patch was already at his laptop, his fingers flying, the despair forgotten, replaced by the thrill of the hunt. I think I know who it is, he murmured, his eyes wide. Elena flagged a name. Just once. In a hidden file. A ghost. A Swiss banker named Henrik Wahlen. He controls 40% of Spectre's private shares. Jake, he's invisible. He lives in a digital fortress. Then we find a door, Jake said. He grabbed his jacket. The energy in the room had pivoted from total defeat to a suicidal, razor-sharp hope. They weren't fugitives anymore. They were predators. They think we're broken, Jake said, looking at his crew, seeing the spark return to their eyes. They think we're done. But they're wrong. We're not giving up. We're done playing by his rigged rules. We're taking the fight straight to the top. He looked at his crew, then at the hole in the wall, as if staring down the entire rigged system. Like this video if you believe in fighting back even when the odds are stacked a mile high. Only quitters would keep scrolling. He turned back to Patch. Find him. Find Wahlen. Patch's grin was all teeth. I don't need to find him, boss. I know exactly where he is. Next week. A private high-security vault in Zurich. He's liquidating an asset. Jake nodded once. The new plan was set. Reaper, pack our gear. Find us a way across the ocean. We're going to Zurich? Reaper asked, the old, familiar adrenaline in his voice. We're going to Zurich, Jake confirmed. To stage a very hostile takeover. Zurich was a different kind of cold. It wasn't the damp chill of a safe house. It was the dry, thin, sterile cold of old money. The air smelled of clean snow and expensive perfume. They had crossed the ocean on a freighter, using the last of their ghost-level contacts to slip into Europe on forged Belgian passports. They were 3 broken mechanics and a 10-year-old girl, and they were hunting a king. Their target was the Wahlen Bank. It wasn't a skyscraper. It was a 3-story monolith of black granite and smoked, blast-proof glass that seemed to absorb the light around it. It looked less like a bank and more like a fortress, a high-end tomb where money went to be buried. They weren't together. Jake, Reaper, and Patch, now clad in black, non-reflective tactical gear pulled from a vacuum-sealed cache Reaper had buried years ago, were in a utility alley across the street. Maya was their overwatch. She was a mile away in a nondescript hotel room, her small figure illuminated only by the glow of Patch's auxiliary laptop. She had Elena's digitized notes, a labyrinth of floor plans, security schedules, and protocol backdoors. She was their mission control, their ghost in the machine. Radio check, Jake whispered, his voice a low vibration in their earpieces. Sensors active, Patch responded, his monocle-like display already scanning the building for electronic signals. Ready to break what needs breaking, Reaper growled. A small, clear voice, impossibly calm, came over the comms. Spectre systems are green, all external sensors active. Mom's notes say they run a full diagnostic purge at 2 o'clock. For exactly 3 minutes, the subterranean vibration sensors will be offline for recalibration. You have to be through the first blast door in that window. 3 minutes, Jake breathed. Let's move. Patch led them not to a door but to a reinforced manhole cover. Reaper didn't bother with a lock. He inserted the tips of a hydraulic spreader into the seam. With a soundless, immense pressure that made his muscles bulge, he operated the pump. There was a low, sickening groan of tortured metal, and the half-ton cover lifted an inch. Jake and Patch slid it aside. The smell of ozone and damp, sterile concrete washed over them. One by one they descended into the dark. They were in. The tunnel was pristine, the floor polished. This wasn't a sewer, it was a private artery. Okay, Maya's voice whispered. You're in the main conduit. 30 meters ahead you'll hit the first checkpoint. A thermal-gated hallway. Be ready. They reached it. A long hall of white marble, so polished it reflected their dark shapes. It looked empty. Cling. Stop, Maya ordered. Patch raised his display. She's right. It's a thermal grid. Floor to ceiling. Interlaced with a laser web. So what? Reaper said. We go through hot? No, Patch said, analyzing the data. The grid is on a 15-second cycle. 12 seconds active, 3 seconds dark for recalibration. We can't make it across in 3 seconds. It's impossible. A beat of silence. Then Maya. You don't have to. Mom called it the arrogant hall. The architect was sloppy. The thermal sensors don't perfectly overlap with the laser grid. There's a blind spot 40 centimeters wide, right against the east wall. But it's not a straight line. It weaves. Patch, can you project the grid? Jake asked. Patch's monocle glowed green. He saw it. A faint, glowing spider's web of lasers. I see it, he breathed. Maya, you're right. The thermal grid leaves a skip point, a cold path. But it's a zigzag. We have to time it perfectly. This was Spectre training. Not force. Patience. I go first, Jake said. He waited, watching Patch's hand. Cycle, now. Jake moved, pressing his back to the marble wall, sliding 10 feet in the darkness. Hot. Patch hissed. Jake froze. He held his breath, not daring to move a muscle. He could feel the air hum as the invisible thermal sensors washed over him, hot enough to register a mouse's breath. The 12 seconds felt like 12 hours. Cycle, now. He moved again. 10 more feet. It took them an agonizing 6 minutes to cross a 40-foot hallway, moving in 3-second bursts of silent, agonizing precision, the threat of instant alarms and sealed doors pressing in on them. They were 3 shadows moving through a digital ghost's blind spot. They reached the end, a circular antechamber. In the center stood a single, massive, circular door. The vault. This is it, Patch said, his voice tense. He jacked his rig into a nearby terminal. His face went pale. Jake. This is impossible. Talk to me, Jake commanded. It's a 2-key system, but it's not 2 keys. The floor is the first key. It's a pressure plate. A single solid-state scale. It's calibrated to the gram. If we step on it, we're gassed. The door is the second key. A biometric voice print lock. It needs Henrik Vollen's voice, and it's keyed to a random 10-word passphrase that changes daily. We can't cross the floor and we can't spoof the lock. We're done. A heavy, crushing silence filled the comms. They were at the goal, separated by an impossible defense. The floor, Maya's voice said, suddenly cutting through. Mom's notes. He's a creature of habit. Vain. Patch, what's the weight calibration? Patch ran the query. It's specific. 78.4 kilograms. Plus or minus half a kilo. It's weighed to Vollen himself. No, Maya said. He never comes down here. He's paranoid. He sends an aide. My mother, she knew the aide. She knew his weight. Patch checked the calibration logs for 92.1 kilograms. Patch's fingers flew. That's the other active calibration. It's a 2-profile system. But why? The aide is 92.1 kilos, Maya explained. Vollen is 78.4. My mother designed the system to only allow Vollen's weight or the aide's weight, but not both. It's an either/or. She called it the vain man's key. Vollen would never allow his aide to be seen as his equal. He made the aide's weight profile the secondary one. The guest. Jake saw it. So the system is currently set to 78.4 kilos. For Vollen, who isn't here. But if we can trip the sensor, Patch said, and make it think the aide is coming? Reaper, Jake said. What do you weigh? Reaper with his gear was well over 110 kilos. Too heavy. Patch, what about you? 58, soaking wet. Too light. Jake looked at them. He was 89 kilos. Closer. Reaper, give me your sidearm. Your spare mags. Your knife. Reaper started unstrapping gear, handing it to Jake. Patch watched the weight calibration on his display. More, Jake said. Reaper handed him a small, dense block of C4. Almost, a little more. Reaper unclipped his heavy-duty radio battery and handed it over. Patch's display flickered. 92.1. 92.1. Jake, you're at 92.1 kilos. You're the aide. Okay, Jake breathed. I can cross the floor. What about the voice lock? Still a problem, Patch said. It's still keyed to Vollen's voice print. I can't. You don't have to, Maya's voice came again, this time softer, sadder. My mother was his chief analyst. She designed this vault's security. And she built an emergency override. An override? Patch was frantic. A code. A voice, Maya whispered. It's not keyed to a password. It's keyed to a specific phrase. In her voice. She was the only other person with override clearance. Patch's hands trembled as he scanned the code. It's It's still here. The override is still active. It's keyed to Elena's voice print. But Elena's gone, Reaper stated, his voice flat. Her daughter isn't, Jake realized. It's not my voice, Maya said. It's hers. She knew this day might come. She recorded it. Where? Jake asked, his heart hammering. On the drive. She told me, if you ever need to open the last door, the key isn't a lullaby. It's a good night. Patch was already diving into the drive's file structure, which was plugged into his comms rig. You found it? A tiny .wav file labeled, Sleep Well. Jake, loaded with Reaper's gear, stepped onto the pressure-sensitive floor. Nothing happened. The light stayed white. He walked, one slow, deliberate step at a time, across the 20-foot gap. He reached the door. Patch. Now. Patch held the speaker of his comms rig up to his microphone, creating a closed loop. He hit play. Elena's voice, warm, clear, and full of a mother's love, filled the sterile, silent vault. Good night, my star. Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning. There was a long, agonizing hiss of static. A click. A pause that stretched for an eternity. Then a deep, reverberating chunk. The pressure plates on the floor went dark. The sensors went blind. With a grinding, thunderous rumble that shook the dust from the ceiling, the 20-ton circular steel door began to slide open. Jake, Reaper, and Patch stood in the darkness of the antechamber, weapons raised as the door revealed the brightly lit chamber beyond. And the man, Henrik Wallin, the most powerful invisible banker in the world, was sitting at a massive steel desk, a single lamp illuminating his face. He wasn't scared. He wasn't surprised. He was just annoyed. He looked up from his paperwork, sighed, and slowly took off his reading glasses. Mr. Deckard, he said, his voice a bored, cultured monotone. You. With a grinding rumble that shook the polished floor, the 20-ton circular door receded into the wall. Jake, Reaper, and Patch moved as a three-man cell, weapons up, sweeping the room in a practiced, lethal triangle. The room wasn't a vault. There was no gold, no cash, no diamonds. It was a sterile, black steel office, cold as a morgue, dominated by a single, massive desk of dark, ancient oak. And a man. Henrik Wallin sat behind the desk, a single, warm lamp illuminating his face. He was in his shirt sleeves, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked annoyed. He slowly, deliberately, placed a bookmark in a thick leather-bound book and looked up, as if they were interns who had interrupted his reading. Mr. Deckard, Wallin said, his voice a bored, cultured monotone. You have made an extraordinary mess of my evening. And you are 2 minutes late. Jake, Reaper, and Patch froze. This wasn't a confrontation. This wasn't a terrified banker. This was a trap. As if on cue the world exploded. Red lights flashed. A deafening, piercing alarm blared through the vault, so loud it vibrated in their teeth. The 20-ton door behind them began to slide shut. Then Harrison Vance's voice, triumphant and dripping with venom, erupted from a hidden intercom system. Checkmate, Jake, he roared, his voice echoing in the small room. You are trapped like the rat you are. Did you really think you could just walk into the most secure bank in the world? I've been tracking you since you left U.S. soil. I let you in. I wanted Mr. Wallin to see firsthand what his investments, liability, looks like. Now he sees a rabid dog and I'm here to put you down. Reaper raised his weapon, aiming it at Wallin. Shut it down. Shut it all down now. Wallin didn't even flinch. He just sighed and looked at the barrel of the gun. Please don't, he said, gesturing to his desk. This oak is from the 17th century. The paperwork to replace it would be exhausting. Jake's mind was racing. Vance was right. He had been played. This wasn't an infiltration, it was an audience. He had been summoned. The rage and humiliation burned in his throat, but he shoved it down, replacing it with a cold, hard resolve. He holstered his sidearm. Reaper looked at him, confused. Boss? He's right, Jake said, his voice a low growl. This isn't a robbery. He unclipped the encrypted drive from his belt. He walked to the desk, his boots silent on the marble floor. It's an audit. He slammed the drive onto the ancient oak, then plugged it into Wallin's private terminal. You're being robbed blind, Jake said, his eyes locked on the bankers. Vance isn't your watchdog. He's a parasite. And we're the exterminators. Wallin steepled his fingers, his boredom returning. A bold claim, Mr. Deckard. I have survived hostile takeovers from men who build and break nations before breakfast. Harrison Vance is an effective, if blunt, instrument. Show me. Vance's laughter crackled over the intercom. Go on, Jake. Show him. Show him the truth you've been clinging to. Jake nodded to Patch. Bring her in. Patch tapped his comms, opening the line to Maya's hotel room. Maya. You're on. The girl's voice, small but impossibly clear, filled the vault. The primary key is a lullaby, she said. She began to sing. The 64-character string of nonsense and numbers echoed in the sterile room, a child's melody in a den of monsters. On Valen's screen, the drive unlocked. The main ledger opened. Read it, Jake ordered. The Syria file. He sold weapons to insurgents, then used your assets, me and my men, to destroy the evidence. Then he collected the government bounty. He played both sides against you. Valen leaned forward, his eyes scanning the data. He nodded slowly. The Venezuela deal, Jake pressed on, his voice rising. He destabilized the entire region, arming rebels, just to manipulate oil futures for his own portfolio. All of it under your nose. Your asset has gone rogue. Jake stood back, his chest tight, waiting for the explosion. This was it. The undeniable proof. Henrik Valen leaned back in his chair. And he smiled. It was a thin, dry, reptilian smile. Mr. Deckard, he said, his voice laced with amusement, this isn't a revelation. This is a quarterly report. Jake's heart stopped. What? You call this crime? Valen chuckled, gesturing to the screen. I call this the cost of emerging markets. Do you have any idea how unstable new resources are? The Syria operation was a brilliant, if slightly messy, piece of asset consolidation. The Venezuela play was inspired. It netted this bank a 200% return. He looked at Jake with genuine pity. You think I didn't know? I approved it. This isn't theft, Mr. Deckard. This is business. Vance's voice was a triumphant roar of laughter on the intercom. Did you hear that, Jake? The cost of business. You came all this way just to find out you were on the right side all along. You lose, you sanctimonious fool. Lose. It was a blow more violent than any bullet. Jake staggered, the blood draining from his face. He had failed. He had sacrificed everything, dragged his men, dragged Maya into the heart of the machine, only to find out the machine was working perfectly. The drive was worthless. The murders, the crimes, they were just features. Reaper looked at Jake, his face a mask of dawning horror. Patch was already looking for an exit, but the 20-ton door was sealed. It was over. Then a small, clear voice cut through Vance's laughter. He's right, Jake. It was Maya. You're showing him the wrong file. Vance's laughter stopped. Valen's smile faltered just a fraction. He hadn't known there was another file. Patch. Maya's voice commanded all business. Root directory. File, Elena private ledger. Patch, his hands shaking, typed the command. A new file appeared. He clicked it. A new password prompt, this one triple encrypted. It's asking for a new key. It's not a lullaby, Maya's voice said. It was trembling now, not with fear, but with a daughter's grief and a lifetime of compressed rage. It's her birthday. October 23, 1978. Patch hit enter. The file unlocked. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a mirror image. A shadow ledger. Elena had built a perfect, secret duplicate of Spectre's entire financial system. Henrik Valen leaned forward. His boredom was gone. My mother was his chief analyst. Maya's voice echoed in the tomb. She saw him skim. She saw what he was really doing. He wasn't just stealing for the company. He was stealing from it. He was stealing from you. On the screen, the Syria file reappeared. But Elena had added a new column. It showed the real bounty payment. And a second hidden transaction. Vance skimming 40% of the profit into a personal, untraceable account in Macau. It showed the Venezuela deal. And another 30% skim. It showed Valen's own personal accounts. And small, fractional, daily transfers, disguised as server fees and maintenance costs, being siphoned out, a digital parasite bleeding him dry, drop by drop. Valen's face went from pale to white to a deep, arterial red. His calm wasn't just shattered, it was incinerated. This wasn't the cost of business. This was theft. This was disrespect. My mother found it all, Maya said, her voice the only sound. She was trying to protect your assets. She was moving your money to safety to a new account when he found out and killed her. Maya recited a 12-digit account number. Valen's fingers, trembling with rage, typed the number. He saw it. His own money. Millions. Sitting in a secure account labeled HV Holding, saved by the woman he'd allowed his attack dog to murder. Lies. Vance's voice shrieked over the intercom, a sudden, panicked squeal. Fabrication. Valen, she's lying. It's a trick. Kill them. Kill them all now. Henrik Valen stood up. He looked at Jake, at Reaper, then at the speaker on the wall where Vance was raving like a lunatic. He ignored it. He picked up a heavy, secure, blood-red phone from his desk. A phone with no dial. He pressed a single button. He waited. Then he spoke, his voice no longer bored, but cold as the space between stars. He's a liability. Pause. Liquidate him. He hung up the phone. The alarms outside the vault stopped. The flashing red lights died. And on the intercom, Harrison Vance's voice, mid-scream, was cut off with a sudden, final click. Silence. Jake just stared, his chest heaving. He looked at the screen, at the two ledgers. One for war crimes, one for theft. He realized the horrifying, simple truth. Valen didn't care about the bodies. He didn't care about Syria or Elena or the rule of law. He only cared about the balance sheet. Vance's ultimate sin wasn't murder, it was greed. It wasn't the war crimes that did it. It was the money, Jake said, his voice rough. His own greed was his downfall. He looked at the red phone, a symbol of a cold corporate world that ran on profit, not justice. If you're sick of a world run by corporate greed and you believe the real heroes are the ones who expose it, comment justice for Elena. Let's make sure the people who fight back are remembered. Valen calmly put his reading glasses back on. He looked at Jake. You have done me a significant service, Mr. Deckard, and a significant disservice. You brought a child into a difficult negotiation. The mess is substantial. We're leaving, Jake said, his voice flat. Yes, you are, Valen agreed. He pressed a button on his desk. The 20-ton vault door began to slide open. Your terrorist flags will be cleared. The Steelhawks, as a known entity, will cease to exist. You will be ghosts, Mr. Deckard. Your payment is your life. I suggest you learn to enjoy it. Jake, Reaper, and Patch backed out slowly, weapons still raised, leaving the banker alone in his black steel tomb, staring at the evidence of his analyst's final, perfect revenge. The 20-ton door slid shut behind them, sealing Henrik Valen in his sterile, black steel tomb. The alarms were silent. The red lights were gone. The pristine white marble of the arrogant hall was just a hallway again. It was over. As they emerged from the utility tunnel into the cold Zurich dawn, the street was deceptively quiet. Then they heard it. The high-performance whine of engines approaching fast. Harrison Vance's convoy, led by the black Rolls-Royce, screamed around the corner. The tactical SUVs fanned out, creating a perimeter. Vance burst from the car, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. He wasn't the smooth, controlled politician now. He was a rabid animal, his tie askew, his eyes wide with fury. He saw Jake, Reaper, and Patch standing by the alley, and a look of triumphant hatred crossed his face. Kill them, he shrieked, pointing at Jake. Now, that's an order. The Spectre operators, 8 of them, exited their vehicles. They raised their weapons. And they waited. They didn't aim at Jake. They aimed past him. Vance's command died in his throat. He looked at his men. Their faces were hidden behind ballistic masks, but their posture was unmistakable. They weren't his. What are you doing? He hissed. I gave you an order. The front door of the Valen bank opened with a quiet, hydraulic hiss. Henrik Valen stepped out, a long, dark overcoat now covering his shirt sleeves. He calmly adjusted his gloves, his breath pluming in the cold air. He walked past the operators, past Vance's car, and stopped a few feet from his rogue CEO. Harrison, Valen said, his voice quiet, carrying in the sudden, absolute silence. Your services are no longer required. What did you say? Vance stammered, his rage collapsing into a daze of confusion. This is my team. This is my company. No, Valen corrected as one might correct a child's grammar. It was my company. And this is my team. He nodded to the lead operator. His access is revoked. All accounts, all identities, all assets. He is liquidated. Liquidated? Vance repeated, the word not making sense. Then the terror hit him. This wasn't a firing. This was an erasure. No. Valen, no. You can't. I built this. You stole, Valen said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. And that is a breach of contract. He turned and walked back into the bank without a second glance. The heavy black door hissed shut. Vance was left alone on the sidewalk, surrounded by operators who looked at him as if he were a piece of furniture. His phone in his hand went dark. His car, the Rolls-Royce, was locked. A moment later, its engine remotely died. He wasn't arrested. That would be too public, too messy. He was simply released. A ghost, left on a cold street in a foreign country with no money, no identity, no power, and a very long list of very dangerous enemies who no longer feared him. Harrison Vance, the man who owned the world, had just been evicted from it. Jake, Reaper, and Patch watched for a beat. The lead operator looked at Jake and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Clean exit. The terrorist flags were gone. The manhunt was over. They turned without a word and walked away. Months later, the smell of grease and hot metal was back. The Steelhawks garage was rebuilt, the new drywall scarred with fresh oil stains, the bullet holes erased but not forgotten. It was quiet, the only sound the click-click of Jake's ratchet on an engine block. Reaper walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. He tossed a small, square piece of cardboard onto Jake's workbench. Jake stopped. He picked it up. It was a postcard. The picture was of a massive, roaring waterfall, all mist and Canadian wilderness. He turned it over. The back was covered in a child's careful, clear handwriting. Finally taught Justice to shake. He's a good boy. And says I have to do math every day, but it's okay. The snow is quiet here. Thank you for being brave. Jake read it twice. He ran his thumb over the small, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, the first real one Reaper had seen in years. He placed the postcard on the workbench, a small square of color in a world of steel and grease, and went back to his engine. The work was still a penance. But for the first time it also felt like a reward.